latest there?
Well, of course, there's been a lot of evidence come in the last 6 or 7 months, seismic information defining the core of the Earth much better. 4 days ago, we had two aurora borealises, one over the North Pole, one over the South Pole. It happened to coincide with a time when the solar wind was very low, less than 350 kilometers per second. Proton density was really light. Bottom line is, it really adds credence to the idea that there is a thinning of the crust at the poles, and we have a strong ion stream coming out of the Earth into our own atmosphere, creating the aurora borealis from the ground up. As you know, a year ago in February, NASA launched the Themis probes, which is a set of 5 satellites that went up to try to understand better why the aurora borealis behaves the way that it does. We don't really have a lot of data from those satellites yet, and I think the reason is the data that's coming in conflicts with the normal, or shall I say, mainstream geological viewpoint of how the Earth is constructed. We're trying to get access to that data now.
Okay, the trip that you were planning, of course, is on hold for now, but you still would like to go, right?
Well, it's scheduled for August of 2009. We were going to go in 2008, but as luck would have it, in 2007 we did a 13-city tour promoting the expedition. Well, it created such popularity that people went and booked the Yamal, which is the nuclear-powered icebreaker, 4 months ahead of schedule. So when it came around time for us to make a move in December or January of 2008 for August of 2008, it was already booked. So we had to postpone until 2009, and it's a good thing we did. We picked up a great producer in Hollywood, and we also picked up a sponsor which is helping us contact corporate sponsors, which will help us retain some of the film rights when we get done with this.
Absolutely, because this could be huge if you do find what you're looking for.
Well, there are several aspects to this. One is, of course, the global warming aspect, being that the ice caps have really melted back. But it's still a long way to where we want to go. It's not exactly the North Pole. It's way high in the Arctic Circle, and there's really only one ship that can make the journey, and that's this nuclear-powered icebreaker. We've looked at diesel-powered icebreakers, but they just don't have the fuel to get there, spend 7 or 8 days taking measurements, and then get back. And the last thing we want to do is get locked in ice for a year up there, not being able to get back.
If you find that Admiral Byrd was correct, if you find that there's a hole up there in the middle of the planet, how do you think this trip will take place? Explain the parameters for me, Brooks, assuming you find what you're looking for.
Well, if our calculations are correct and our measurement teams lead us to the right spot, and we find at the very least an opening in the crust deep beneath the ocean where perhaps two oceans are blending and sea life is passing back and forth, and that's the reason we're seeing these million-year-old life forms show up in fishermen's nets all over the planet, that's going to change everything. It's probably going to earn the team that finds that the Nobel Prize in geology or oceanography. But at the very most, if we do find a curvature of the crust and we find something like Edgar Rice Burroughs' hole beneath the fog in the north region, then everything changes. And we will be broadcasting film, or digital anyway, live during the entire 15-day voyage. So what we see, you will see.
Now, the curvature would be ever so slight that you really wouldn't notice it as you move along. Would there be then ocean water right into the curve? I mean, it would just keep flowing in, right?
Yes, there would. And you're right. The curvature would be so slight because the Earth is the diameter that it is. We only have about 8 or 9 miles of perspective. So if we are looking at a curvature with a radius, anything greater than that, you're really not going to notice it. It's all going to be sea level to you. That's why we have to have a precision gyroscope on the ship so that we can track the curvature of the Earth by watching this stable gyroscope. Once it begins to over-rotate, we know we've sailed into what's often called the oceanic depression.
If you boat yourself into this thing, how do you get out of it?
Well, the idea is not to sail this 23,000-ton, 75,000 horsepower ship into the Hollow Earth. I don't think the Murmansk Shipping Company would enjoy that. But we could circumnavigate it, and there is a smaller boat on the ship, and there's also a helicopter on the ship. So we do plan on making daily excursions by air from the ship out ahead and off to the sides so that we can cover a lot more territory in a very short amount of time.
So you could fly into it?
We could.
Would you see anything, do you think, except for water?
Well, other witnesses, not the least of which is Admiral Byrd, say that there is a place where the warm wind blows. It is a place where there's liquid water and tropical plants and birds and bees and flowers, and that's not the kind of thing we should find up there. But if we do, we're going to get it on film. Well,
and he also witnessed extra beings that live down there.
Well, if you go by a lot of the writings that are circulating, one is actually called the Admiral Byrd Diary. And
which may not be his diary, right?
Yeah, and I've spoken to a couple of people who actually held it in their hands, and they're getting on up in years themselves and can't remember all the details to it. We have to be skeptical because we're scientists. We're not going up there on channeled information. We're going up there once we leave the dock in Murmansk, Russia. There's no turning back. There are no supply ships. There's no rescue ship. We have to take everything with us that we're going to need, and it's not going to be easy. We're talking high seas, high winds, cold temperatures, icebergs. There'll be seasickness, possible injuries. It's not going to be easy.
Beyond your own curiosity, Brooks, do you think the opening is there?
I have to believe that there's something to the evidence. As we approach it, as we refine our hypothesis, as we build better experiments based on the data that's coming in from remote viewing, from satellite data, from earthquake data, we're getting better and better at refining our measurement systems. It looks promising that there is a gap between the crust and the core. It may be as little as 200 miles. It may be as much as 1,100 miles. But I can tell you, if there is a void there, there will be life there. Now, it might be microbial, and it might be highly complex.
Do you believe that modern scientists, through governments, know that this opening is there?
Wow, I have my doubts. Of course, I trust my government implicitly. I know they tell me everything they know.
Yeah.
So let me get my tongue out of my cheek here.
Yeah.
I think that based on the data and based on the lack of data from very good instrumentation that's been recently launched, I think they're holding back something. And lots of people have written me letters and phone called me and said, they're not going to let you go and the government is going to prevent you from going. And I just don't believe that at all. I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist, and we have no fear. We're going forward.
Yeah, I was just with Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell a few months ago in Washington, D.C., whom I trust explicitly, and he tells me that he believes we're being visited by
the Byrd Wall. This is part of a series of clues that can help you get your head around both the design of the flat Earth system we live in and who has been involved in the deception to hide it from you. This clue revolves around one of the most remarkable men you may have never heard of, Richard E. Byrd, and his relationship with Antarctica and the secretive missions he carried out there until his dying day. Some of you have followed the legend of Richard Byrd through the Hollow Earth theory. We aren't going to be covering any Hollow Earth in this video, but instead focus on the man and his involvement with the South Pole. The Reader's Digest version of Richard Byrd is as follows. Born in 1888, he became an American naval officer who specialized in feats of exploration. He was a pioneering American aviator, Medal of Honor winner, polar explorer, aircraft navigator, expedition leader in the worst environments in the world, and the youngest admiral in the history of the Navy. In addition, his list of awards takes up several pages in Wikipedia, including 3 ticker tape parades in his honor. In short, he was Indiana Jones on steroids. Some people will say that Roy Chapman Andrews was the real Indiana Jones. And you might be right. But Richard Byrd beat Indy 6 days a week and twice on Sunday. I mention all his accolades to paint a picture of credibility and trust. The governments of the United States and the world trusted his judgment and leadership, and took advantage of every chance they had to put him in charge of special missions. The first large-scale mission was an expedition to Antarctica in 1928. This was noteworthy because even though he had just flown over the North Pole in 1926, all expeditions from 1928 on were focused on the South. The expedition lasted 2 years, and during it, at the age of 41, he was promoted to admiral. His second Antarctic expedition ran from 1933 to 1935, and his third from 39 to 40. While in Antarctica, he was also an advisor for other countries who had their own expeditions, including England, France, Germany, and building off previous countries' expeditions from Belgium, Japan, and Sweden. He then helped lead U.S. Navy fleet operations in World War II, was present during the Japanese surrender in 1945, but then something strange happened. He went back to Antarctica. Now, some of you aren't surprised because he'd been there since 1928, and I agree with you. It's the how that's interesting here. His fourth trip to Antarctica wasn't an expedition. It was a military operation called Operation High Jump. Commanding an entire aircraft carrier group that included 13 support ships, Admiral Byrd led 4,700 men to the South Pole, for reasons that are still shrouded to this day. Some say they were chasing the remaining Nazi fleet, even though Germany had surrendered a full year earlier. Others say there was a Nazi base established in Antarctica during the war, when Admiral Byrd was absent. None of these theories are important for this video. What we do know is that the U.S. had sent an excessively large military force to the ice, all under the guise of peaceful intentions. During this operation, Admiral Byrd told a Chile newspaper this: "The most important result of his observations and discoveries is the potential effect that they have in relation to the security of the United States. The fantastic speed in which the world is shrinking," recalled the Admiral, "is one of the most important lessons learned during his recent Antarctic exploration. I have to warn my compatriots that the time has ended when we were able to take refuge in our own isolation and rely on the certainty that the distances, the oceans, and the poles were a guarantee of safety." After the operation, Admiral Byrd toured the States and gave interviews, the most interesting of which is a national television show in 1954 called The Longines Chronoscope. A horrible name, but a decent show. I've added a segment of it at the end of this video and linked it in the description. During this television interview, he first spoke of an area beyond the South Pole as large as the United States, which no one had set foot on yet. He then went on to say that there would probably be expeditions year after year because the U.S. government had really become interested. The interviewers then probed as to why the interest in the South, when any perceived military threat from Russia, keep in mind this was 1954, would be from the North. He went on to say that it was the most valuable and important place in the world for science. It involved the future of the nation, an untouched reservoir of untapped resources, including coal, oil, minerals, and uranium. He added that at the time of the interview, there were 7 nations currently engaged in Antarctica, including Russia, Australia, Argentina, Chile, and New Zealand. During the interview, the Admiral talked about planning the next military mission to Antarctica. It was called Operation Deep Freeze and ran from 1955 to 1956. The mission was completed, and he supposedly returned home. Now this is where you come in and say, so what? And normally I'd agree with you, except for what happened next. Nothing happened next. The missions just suddenly stopped, and that was it. No other expeditions, military or otherwise, were conducted on the continent ever. Then a treaty was put in place banning any country from doing basically anything. The end. And if you're wondering what you're missing, it's this. Admiral Byrd goes on television, says that this massive body of land, most of which sits on a plateau 2 miles high, is rich with every resource you could ever want, energy rich, pristine, with no indigenous population or plant life, and every country that has sent teams is ready to carve it up like a big turkey. Not to mention, there's an expanse of land larger than the United States they haven't even looked at yet. And out of the blue, everyone just calls the whole thing off? There are no environmentalists in 1959. This is land of diner food and 20-cent gas. I'm calling total BS on this one. The dollar value of the initial resources find would have fueled armies of greedy companies. So what happened? They found the edge, that's what. And the last thing they were going to do was let unsupervised companies near it, regardless of the money. Even if it was hundreds of miles away, you couldn't allow resource corporations even into a safe area, and then years down the road as they expanded, tell them, oh, sorry, you can't go beyond this point. When the companies would ask why, what would you tell them? And now the interior of Antarctica is off limits, with no revisions until the year 2041. You can take tours of the outer islands, but there is a hidden line, enforced by the military, that you will not be able to cross. Because the interior is actually the exterior edge. It's there, it's hidden, and it's protected. The Earth you live on is flat. So do some of your own research and ask questions. Please feel free to email me at msargent23@comcast.net or 303-494-6631.
Our very distinguished guest for this evening is Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
The North Pole used to be a no man's land, but these are the days when, by buying a ticket on a commercial airliner, you can fly across the North Pole and drink a cocktail at the same time. Yet only 60 or more years ago, about 35 years ago, our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Admiral, an expedition to which I believe you're the advisor is now en route. What is that expedition doing?
Well, that's the icebreaker Atka, and it's a reconnaissance expedition. It's going down to the South Pole area to make certain observations and to look for some bases. They will be back in April, and they will report back, and upon the information we get from that undertaking, we will base the bigger expedition that's to follow.
Is that very definitely planned, or is that...
That is being planned right now. So I'm willing to say to you that there will be a number of expeditions that will follow, I think, year after year, at the bottom of the world, because the government has really become interested.
Well, Admiral Byrd, I can understand, I think everybody can, the interest in the North Pole because it's so near our greatest challenger, Soviet Russia. But why this interest in the bottom of the world? Nobody living down there, is there?
No, it's pretty cold. There's only one permanent resident, that's the emperor penguin. The little ones live further north. I tell you one reason they're interested. It's by far the most valuable, important place left in the world for science. That's why the scientific groups all over the nation are really interested. But more important than that, it has to do with the future of the nation, those to come after us, or even during your lifetime, because it happens to be an untouched reservoir of natural resources. And, you know, as the world shrinks with an ever-increasing acceleration, far-flung places, once useless, like we thought the North Pole was, and no man's land, become very useful. The bottom of the world will be important, not only to us, but to our allies.
I was going to ask you, does it have military importance?
It has some, and as the world shrinks, it will continue to shrink with an ever-increasing acceleration, thus bringing these places closer. And in the future, I can see a time when it will be very, very important strategically.
Well, has the development of air power increased the strategic importance of places like the
very much
Palmer
so.
Peninsula, was it?
Very much so. Even now, if anything happened and we lost the Panama Canal, we would have to control the islands just north of Antarctica, which are part of Antarctica. Then between there and Cape...
Admiral, you speak of the resources of Antarctica. What are they? What are the natural resources there?
Well, we've found enough of coal within 180 miles of the South Pole in a great ridge of mountains. It's not covered with snow, enough to supply the whole world for quite a while.
Well,
that's the coal. Now, there's evidence of many other minerals. We are pretty sure there's oil. Now, that coal shows the bottom of the world. Now, by far the coldest spot in the world. Where that coal is gets 100 below zero in the winter.
Well,
it was once tropical. So we think there's oil there, and there's evidence, probably uranium there.
is it any secret, is there uranium there? That would be the only thing that would be practical to actually go after, I suppose. Everything else would be economically unfeasible, wouldn't it?
Well, as we recklessly expend our resources, the time will come when we'll have to go after that stuff down there. Well, you know, I avoided what you said about uranium. I'm not sure about that. I don't want to have the world fight over the Antarctic.
And Robert, is there a competition among other nations to try to get information about Antarctica and possibly to secure some of these resources?
Well, yes. There are now 7 nations very much interested. Russia is interested tremendously. That I'm sure of. Australia has an expedition down there. The Argentine, the Chile, New Zealand, Britain, and so on. Now, you can understand those people down there being interested because they live down there, the New Zealanders, the Argentinians, the Chileans, and the Australians. And so we don't do much about claiming anything.
Admiral, you make this sound a little crowded. Are there that many expeditions now there or en route there?
Well, you know, as I said, it's the most peaceful place in the world, but I don't think it will be for long because of this intense interest on the part of other nations and this nation.
4 planes spanning out over a continent of unknown territory larger than Texas, California, and Arizona combined. Over freezing wastes without people, without life, without vegetation. Nature's most formidable challenge to man. The 4 planes are gassed up, all controls triple checked, motors heated. For they face cold as extreme as 60 below, unrelenting, murderous. Photographic units lead the parade of science to the planes. Each is a flying laboratory. The cameras are the Trimetricons and the K-17s. That spied out enemy secrets during the war. Now each plane carries 250 pounds of film to record some of nature's last great mysteries. The war's secret radar magnetic detectors are here too, bolted on like bombs. In war, their electronic impulses spotted minefields buried deep under the surface. Now they will read far below the ice, detect and identify minerals, coal, iron, precious ores. Bird gets the words, "Ready, sir." He boards the leading plane. Gives the command, take off. Crews aviation to rock the ships and thus free the skis frozen to the ice. Now all the work that has gone before, the planning, the task of preparing ships, of training men, the perilous voyage through the ice, now all of these investments of time and sometimes of suffering are come into focus. Takeoffs were non-stop flights over the desolate, danger-studded wastes of Antarctica. Flights of great distance, the equivalent of, back at home, winging non-stop from the Canadian border to the Gulf of Mexico. Aviation is all important in the Navy's Antarctic exploration, just as aviation is all important in a modern Navy that must be strong under and above the sea, as well as on it. Shelf ice, Byrd leads his 4 planes in the long climb over pressure ridge areas, heading for the polar plateau, 10,000 feet up. Below are no landing fields, only deep crevasses, pressure ridges 100 feet high, instant destruction for a plane forced down. Byrd pioneered the first South Pole flight in 1929. He applies again the practice of constant vigilance, careful calculations that assured his earlier successes. Over this cruel country, Byrd flies today at 3 miles a minute. In earlier explorations, 3 miles in one day was frequently the utmost for Shackleton and Scott for Britain, Amundsen for Norway, and Byrd himself for America. The Beardmore Glacier, 200 miles long, 50 wide, 1,000 feet deep, who knows? Byrd checks position by the sun compass. The glacier signals the South Pole itself. Here, Byrd drops the flags of the United Nations, carefully boxed, a symbol of America's goodwill to all nations. Now beyond the pole, Byrd focuses his cameras and magnetic detectors on land new to him and to all mankind.
The pilot, Commander David E. Bunger, wipes his frosted windshield, a constant source of trouble in polar flying. He is over the Shackleton ice shelf, named for the great English explorer who kept returning to the Antarctic until death, so often escaped, kept its rendezvous with him. The smooth shelf roughens. Dark rocks, called nunataks, appear above the ice. Then rugged mountain ranges as far as the eye can see.
Byrd's planes, deep into the unknown, are the eyes of civilization, recording, evaluating, mapping. Plateaus, mountain ranges, with peaks 20,000 feet above sea level. The trimetric lenses, clicking overlapping exposures every 3 seconds, photograph from horizon to horizon. Coal, a mountain of coal. Byrd later declares Antarctic mines, if once tapped, could supply the world's coal needs for centuries. These official motion pictures can give only a cross-section of the miles of photographic records accumulated on this expedition by the Navy. The exposed mapping film will take 5 years to assemble. Amplifying these are the radar magnetic detectors, accurately recording mineral discoveries of immense value for the future use of all mankind. England, Norway, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, South American countries, and Soviet Russia are claiming Antarctic territory. The United States recognizes no claim, and so far has made no formal claims for itself. But international policies cannot concern the Admiral now. His duty is to keep his flying laboratories functioning, to fulfill his dream of a lifetime. The word "gas half gone, sir," comes from the engineer tabulating fuel tank readings. Byrd radios his pilots, return to base. By the third leg of their triangular course, the planes head back for Little America. Byrd's plane takes the widest swing fuel permits as the lenses of the Trimets continue recording new territory. This is the last big flight. Byrd is determined to record the maximum possible. One by one, the planes swing in over Tent City. Flight operations checks them in and safely down. Plane 2, plane 3, plane 4. But not plane 1. Byrd's plane is yet to be accounted for. Byrd is missing.
the smooth shelf roughens. Dark rocks, called nunataks, appear above the ice. Then rugged mountain ranges as far as the eye can see. Bunger leans forward in amazement. His eyes have caught a sudden and unbelievable change in scenery. The universal white has turned to chocolate brown, dotted with blue. A cameraman goes into action. 300 square miles of land without snow. Land that might be in New Mexico or Arizona. Pictures alone will prove Bunger has discovered a warm oasis in the shadow of the pole. It is for such supreme moments as this that men brave the hardships of exploration. The astounding, undreamed of fact is that they are over a chain of warm water lakes whose shores, except for small patches, are free of ice and snow. Commander Bunger circles the largest lake in sight, 5 miles long. He comes in to make a landing. Water temperatures must be recorded. Samples taken. He finds the water fresh, the temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit. On the shores are vast deposits of coal and of minerals of the utmost importance to civilization.
It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Wittnauer Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Wittnauer, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening, this is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Larry Lasser, CBS News correspondent, and Kenneth Crawford, National Affairs Editor of Newsweek magazine. Our very distinguished guest for this evening is Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
The North Pole used to be a no man's land, but these are the days when, by buying a ticket on a commercial airliner, you can fly across the North Pole and drink a cocktail at the same time. You know, only 70 or more years ago, about 35 years ago, our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
This is a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Well, Admiral, do you hope to see that?
I do.
Well, Admiral,
Yeah.
would you say that since you've been to both the extremities of Earth, are these expeditions to such far-off places, are they getting easier because of modern techniques, or is danger still close at hand?
Well, it's a little risky, but nothing like it used to be with the old slow planes and the small cruising radius where we had to put down bases. We replaced the dog teams, and of course that was a big improvement. But now the planes go much faster and they're safer, and they have a much bigger cruising radius. You haven't got the danger of a terribly heavy load.
Admiral, an expedition to which I believe you're the advisor is now en route. What is that expedition doing?
Well, that's the icebreaker Atka, and it's a reconnaissance expedition. It's going down to the South Pole area to make certain observations and to look for some bases. They will be back in April, and they will report back, and upon the information we get from that undertaking, we will base the bigger expedition that's to follow.
Is that very definitely planned, or is that...
That is being planned right now. So I'm willing to say to you that there will be a number of expeditions that will follow, I think, year after year, at the bottom of the world, because the government has really become interested.
Well, Admiral Byrd, I can understand, I think everybody can, the interest in the North Pole because it's so near our greatest challenger, Soviet Russia. But why this interest in the bottom of the world? Nobody living down there, is there?
No, it's pretty cold. There's only one permanent resident, that's the emperor penguin. The little ones live further north. I tell you one reason they're interested. It's by far the most valuable, important place left in the world for science. That's why the scientific groups all over the nation are really interested. But more important than that, it has to do with the future of the nation, those to come after us, or even during your lifetime, because it happens to be an untouched reservoir of natural resources. And you know, as the world shrinks with an ever-increasing acceleration, far-flung places once useless, like we thought the North Pole was, and no man's land, become very useful. The bottom of the world will be important, not only to us, but to our allies.
I was going to ask you, does it have military importance?
It has some, and as the world shrinks, it will continue to shrink with an ever-increasing acceleration. thus bringing these places closer. And in the future, I can see a time when it will be very, very important strategically.
Well, has the development of air power increased the strategic importance of places like the
very much
Palmer
so.
Peninsula, we'll say?
Very much so. Even now, if anything happened and we lost the Panama Canal, we would have to control the islands just north of Antarctica, which are part of Antarctica, and between there and Cape Horn.
I've heard it said that there are 7 continents in the world, and one of them has never been seen by a woman, and that's Antarctica. Is that actually true?
Well, if the Palmer Peninsula is an island, as far as I know, that's true. No woman's ever stepped foot upon the Antarctic continent, and it's the most peaceful place in the world.
Well, I'm sure that won't last very long. I understand that now that you're working with the Arnold Bread Company in charge of frozen foods. Now, is there any future for frozen foods down these frozen extremities?
Well, I think the human race can be helped by that. This was thought out by Dean Arnold, who's, in my opinion, a great humanitarian. He learned that we went down there after 4 or 5 years and finished a meal that we had left there on the table when we had evacuated Little America. Everything was perfect, including the bread. So he got the idea of this frozen bread, and already he sent some to Europe, and it worked very well over there for some of the starving people. So you can store it down in the Antarctic, and against the lean years, and you wouldn't have any people in the world really starving if you did that.
Yes, in the event of an atomic war...
You'd stay there forever.
Admiral, you speak of the resources of Antarctica. What are they? What are the natural resources there?
Well, we've found enough of coal within 180 miles of the South Pole in a great ridge of mountains. It's not covered with snow, enough to supply the whole world for quite a while.
Well,
that's the coal. Now, there's evidence of many other minerals. We are pretty sure there's oil. Now, that coal shows the bottom of the world. Now, by far the coldest spot in the world. Where that coal is gets 100 below zero in the winter.
Well,
it was once tropical. So we think there's oil there, and there's evidence, probably uranium there.
Is it any secret? Is there uranium there? That would be the only thing that would be practical to actually go after, I suppose. Everything else would be economically unfeasible, wouldn't it?
Well, as we recklessly expend our resources, the time will come when we'll have to go after that stuff down there. Well, you know, I avoided what you said about uranium. I'm not sure about that. I don't want to have the world fight over the Antarctic.
And Robert, is there a competition among other nations to try to get information about Antarctica and possibly to secure some of these resources?
Well, yes. There are now 7 nations very much interested. Russia is interested tremendously. That I'm sure of. Australia has an expedition down there. The Argentine, the Chile, New Zealand, Britain, and so on. Now, you can understand those people down there being interested because they live down there, the New Zealanders, the Argentinians, the Chileans, and Australians. And so we don't do much about claiming anything.
Admiral, you make this sound a little crowded. Are there that many expeditions now there or en route there?
Well, you know, as I said, it's the most peaceful place in the world, but I don't think it will be for long because of this intense interest on the part of other nations and this nation.
Well, Admiral Byrd, are private expeditions a thing of the past? Is expedition and exploration, making expedition and exploration now purely a government function because of the tremendous cost and organization?
No, I don't think so. I think down south it may be more or less a thing of the past, but not other expeditions that go there. A lot of them go north now.
This latest expedition now on the way is a government expedition, I take it.
Yes, that's the government.
But may I ask you, is there a great difference between the top of the world and the bottom of the world?
There is. Now, the North Pole is the center of an ocean 10,000 feet deep. The South Pole, the center of a plateau, 10,000 feet high. The North Polar Sea is surrounded by continents slightly frozen. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by a belt of ice frozen seas of at least 1,200 miles thick. Now, the south is a plateau. It gets, in some places, 14,000 feet up. I've been over areas about 13,000, and it's a little bit chilly up there. So there's that big difference between the top and bottom of the world. The north really isn't very cold up there on the Arctic Ocean.
Not compared to the south. Admiral Byrd, we often hear it said that our young Americans now aren't as hardy as their forefathers. Do you think that Americans do measure up to the standards, the physical standards and morale standards of the past?
I do. I don't believe that. I think they're just as hardy.
Well, what would you say was the most valuable factor on an expedition? Is it morale, or physical courage, or is it sheer equipment?
Well, I've always thought that loyalty was by far the most important trait. The British told me that when I first went down in 28, that I couldn't possibly get through the winter night without a mutiny if I took more than 20 men. But to serve science, I had to take 42 men. And then I took 56 the next time, and so on. So, and I did find that loyalty was the most important thing during the winter night when it's very hard on your nerves. I think that's best trait.
Well, that's a very valuable characteristic at any time. Well, thank you very much, Admiral Byrd. It's been a great pleasure to have you here tonight.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Yeah.
The opinions expressed on the Longines Chronoscope were those of the
of secret underground bases in the United States and other countries. Many of these secret bases are alleged to be cooperatives with the U.S. military and various extraterrestrial races. These stories are nothing new. I heard these rumors circulating in the halls of the Pentagon years before they became public to UFO researchers. There is no doubt that there are secret underground military bases in such locations as Area 51 in Nevada and Pine Gap in Australia. However, it's still open to debate whether or not some of these bases also house UFOs and the alleged aliens who pilot them. I will tell you that the secret NSA remote viewing project that I participated in during my days at Fort Meade, Maryland, did unintentionally view several top secret underground facilities located in the western parts of the United States. We were not allowed to compare notes or even openly discuss our individual responses to target areas. But we did talk to each other after hours, and all of us had the same impressions that some of these bases were involved in contacts with creatures that were not human as we define the terms. Suffice to say that there are secret underground bases out there that contain more than just the normal earthly military hardware. Dulce is a small, quiet town in northern New Mexico. There's nothing about Dulce to distinguish it from the thousands of other towns just like it all across the country. But, according to some, Dulce harbors a deep, dark secret. The secret is harbored deep below ground where allegedly there is an underground base said to be a joint government alien biogenetic laboratory designed to carry out bizarre experiments on animals and even humans. Some of what we know about the Dulce facility comes from a former security guard named Thomas Costello. In late 1979, Thomas could no longer cope with the awesome reality he had to confront. As a high-level security officer at the top-secret base, he had seen things that left him deeply disturbed. After careful consideration, he decided to desert the facility and take a few items with him as proof of his fantastic story. Using a small camera, he took over 30 photos of areas within the multi-level complex. He collected documents and removed a security videotape from the control center which showed various camera views of the hallways, labs, U.S. government personnel, and even what he said were aliens. Then, by shutting off the alarm and camera system in one of the over 100 exits to the surface, he left the facility with his shocking evidence. The originals were hidden after 5 sets of copies were made and distributed. Thomas was ready to go into hiding, but when he went to pick up his wife and young son, he found a van and government agents waiting. His wife and child had been kidnapped. He had been betrayed by a fellow worker. The agents wanted what Thomas had taken from the facility in order to get his wife and son back. However, it became apparent to him that his family was going to be used in biological experiments and were not going to be returned unharmed. At that point, he decided to disappear. Thomas alleges that there are over 18,000 short grays at the Dulce facility and that he saw creatures that he called reptilian humanoids. The multi-level facility at Dulce is reported to have a central hub which is controlled by base security. The security level goes up as one descends to lower levels. Thomas had an Ultra 7 clearance. He knew of 7 sublevels, but there may have been more. Most of the aliens supposedly were on levels 5, 6, and 7, with alien housing on level 5. The only sign in English was over the tube shuttle station hallway, which read, "To Los Alamos." Connections go from Dulce to the Page, Arizona facility, then onto an underground base below Area 51. Tube shuttles go to and from Dulce to facilities all over the western United States. There appears to be a vast network of tube shuttles connections under the United States which extends into a global system of tunnels and sub-cities. At the Dulce base, most signs on doors and hallways are in the alien symbol language and a universal symbol system understood by humans and aliens. Thomas stated that after the second level, everyone is weighed in the nude, then given a uniform. The weight of the person is put on a computer ID card each day. A change in weight of over 3 pounds requires a physical exam and x-ray. All elevators are controlled magnetically. There are no elevator cables. The magnetic system is inside the walls of the elevator shaft. There are no normal electrical controls. Everything is controlled by advanced magnetics, including lighting. Level 1 contains the garage for street maintenance. Level 2 contains the garage for trains, shuttles, tunnel boring machines, and disc maintenance. The studies on Level 4 include human aura research, as well as all aspects of telepathy, hypnosis, and dreams. Thomas says that they know how to separate the bioplasmic body from the physical body to place an alien entity life force matrix within a human body after removing the soul life force matrix of the human. Level 6 is privately called Nightmare Hall. It holds the genetic labs where experiments are done on fish, seals, birds, and mice that are vastly altered from their original form. There are multi-armed and multi-legged humans and several cages and vats of humanoid, bat-like creatures as tall as 7 feet. The aliens have taught the humans a lot about genetics, things both useful and dangerous. The gray and reptoid species are highly analytical and technologically oriented. They have had ancient conflicts with the Nordic humans and other space societies and may be staging here for a future conflict. Intensely into computing and bioengineering scientists, they are led to doing reckless experiments without regard for what we consider to be ethical and empathetic conduct towards other living creatures. It was when Thomas encountered humans in cages on level 7 of the Dulce facility that things finally reached a climax for him. Row after row of thousands of humans, human mixture remains, and embryos of humanoids were kept in cold storage. He says he frequently encountered humans in cages, usually dazed or drugged, but sometimes they cried and begged for help. The workers were told that these people were hopelessly insane and involved in high-risk drug tests to cure insanity. Yet more testimony to the reality of underground alien bases came from a man named Phil Schneider, an engineer who claimed to have discovered an alien base accidentally. Schneider is said to have committed suicide, but his ex-wife says that his death was suspicious and that he was found with a rubber catheter hose wrapped around his neck and tied in the back, evidence that she says points to murder. Schneider claimed that back in 1954, under the Eisenhower administration, the federal government decided to circumvent the Constitution of the United States and form a treaty with alien entities. It was called the 1954 Granada Treaty, which basically made the agreement that the aliens involved could take some cows now and then and also test their implanting techniques on a few select human beings. But they had to give details to the government about the people. In return, the United States would get alien technology that would help them defeat the Russians. However, after the bases were built and the aliens firmly established, the government realized that they had been fooled. There was no promised technology, and the aliens did what they wanted when they wanted. They were in total control. Schneider said that he was involved in building an addition to the deep underground military base at Dulce. The base goes down 7 levels and is over 2.5 miles deep. At that particular time, workers had drilled 4 holes in the desert and were going to link them together and blow out large sections at a time. Schneider's job was to go down the holes and check the rock samples and recommend the explosives to deal with the particular rock. As the crew was headed down, they found themselves amidst a large cavern that was full of creatures known as the Large Greys. Schneider says that they had surprised a whole underground base of existing aliens. Later, they found out that the creatures had been living on our planet for a long time, perhaps 1,000,000 years. According to the late Bill Cooper, a confrontation broke out between the human scientists and the aliens at the Dulce Underground Lab. The aliens took the scientists hostage, and Delta forces were sent in to free them, but they were no match for the aliens' weapons. 66 people were killed during this action. As a result, we withdrew all joint projects for at least 2 years. Some remote viewers who were in the same NSA operation as myself told me personally that centuries ago, the people who were the creators of what we now call the New World Order entered into a pact with an alien nation hidden within the Earth. The U.S. government in 1933 agreed to trade animals in exchange for high-tech knowledge and to allow the creatures to use underground bases in the western United States. A special group was formed to deal with these alien beings. In the 1940s, these creatures began shifting their focus of operations from Central and South America to the United States. These creatures could be the same beings who were in contact and helping the German Nazis. Now they are slowly spreading like cancer to the United States. Skeptics have expressed doubts about the existence of secret underground bases. They always ask, where's all the dirt? Well, one method of tunneling that has been available to the military since the 1950s and is now just being considered for public use is nuclear tunnel boring. The method for tunneling involves melting rock using a machine in which the molten material can be disposed adjacent to the boring zone in cracks in the rock and as a glassy wall lining of the formed tunnel. The heat source can be electrical or nuclear, but for deep drilling, a nuclear reactor is preferred. This amazing boring device is capable of drilling at depths totally inaccessible with previous drilling techniques. The stories that surround the secret underground bases and tunnels all seem to be connected to a thread involving the same types of alleged UFO entities, namely the Greys and Reptilians. These are beings that are fairly recent to the UFO scene, emerging as the dominant creatures associated with UFOs sometime in the early 1970s. Before that time, most reported UFO contacts involved human-looking aliens, often referred to as the Nordics because of their light-skinned, blue eyes and blonde hair. There were also small humanoids sighted starting in the early 1950s, but the big-eyed Greys and the dinosaur-like reptilians were not reported until much later. It is almost as if these creatures' true form is being kept from us. Possibly they are able to disguise themselves to fit our cultural expectations. However, they always keep a humanoid appearance, 1 head, 2 arms, 2 legs. They look more like us than an actual alien probably would. Given how diverse life is here on Earth, it would be almost impossible for life on another planet to develop looking so much like us. Maybe they look so much like us because we are actually much closer to them than we know. So where do UFOs and their pilots actually come from? Do they come from outer space or from hidden places deep underground? Maybe the reptilians aren't from some distant planet. Maybe they are from Earth just like us. Maybe they are descendants of the ancient dinosaurs that lived millions of years ago. Maybe they didn't become extinct. Maybe, like us, they evolved into intelligent creatures who built their own civilization and science. Possibly some left to conquer outer space while others stayed behind to build their society deep underground. Maybe now they're returning to Earth, their home planet, to find it overrun with a bunch of talking monkeys. So now we find ourselves back to square one, asking the same questions but not getting the answers. Perhaps there are no real answers, only mysteries upon mysteries. This is probably why we are seeing a battle taking place within the groups that control what little actual information there is about UFOs. There is the Aquarius group, associated with the New World Order-controlled MJ-12, and opposing them is a group known as COM-12. COM-12 is reportedly trying to sustain a rearguard action to keep and preserve constitutional government and is deliberately leaking information that MJ-12 is trying to hide. It is our duty to continue this mission and to bring the truth out into the light. But just how good is this information considering the deceptive nature of the UFO beings? They have lied to us about their origins, their technology, and why they are here. To still think that all UFOs and the creatures that control them are strictly from other planets is naive. Now, my best guess is that the UFO phenomena actually is a number of different phenomenons that bear superficial resemblance to each other. Yes, some UFOs are interplanetary spacecraft, but others could be interdimensional, spiritual, even time travelers from our own future. We can't leave out any scenario because they all can fit into the puzzle one way or another. In fact, many UFOs are man-made ships using advanced technology such as zero-point energy and anti-gravity, and this has been kept secret from the public. Now, this is not as wild a claim as it may seem. As far back as the early 1900s, the great genius Nikola Tesla, who gave us our modern electrical technologies, discovered how to tap into the abundant natural energies that permeate the universe. His discoveries eventually resulted in the first experiments in time travel and anti-gravity. Of course, Tesla claimed that in 1899 he received radio signals from what he said could have been intelligent creatures not of this planet. So again, we have the possible alien connection, and the mystery continues. Okay, fine, thanks. I've just been told that our studio may have been discovered and that we should all get ready to leave. But before we do, I would like to lead this group and everyone who is watching this closed-circuit broadcast in a prayer of protection. Now, even though most religions nowadays have been taken over by those only interested in power and money, true spirituality comes from within our souls and doesn't need a religion to connect us with God the Creator. So I now ask everyone to close your eyes and to visualize the perfect white light of God in creation surrounding us and protecting us from outside influences and from anyone or anything that would do us harm. I pray to God the Creator to protect us in our mission to bring truth and enlightenment to the starving souls on planet Earth. We acknowledge that we are all one with God the Creator, and that we all contain within us the seed of divine love and creation. We all have a unique place within the universe, and God has a special task for us. Please protect us from the forces of evil, greed, and materialism, and allow us the vision to see beyond the veil of lies and deceptions that have enveloped the world. Only with your help, God, can we battle those who want ultimate control. And only with your help can mankind finally find its true place on this planet and in the rest of the universe. In the name of God the Creator. Amen. So I'd like to thank you all for being with me tonight. Those of you in the studio and those of you watching by our secure internet feed. Tonight I've just barely scratched the surface of the complex situation in today's world. But it's a good place to start. It is now up to you to spread the word about the great lies that are fed to us every day. It is up to you to help open the eyes of those who have been asleep and allowed the wolves at our door to move in and set up house. Now this won't be easy. Those in control will use every power in their means to try and stop you. But for those of us who love our country, our freedom, and our planet, we know the truth, and we will not be stopped. We have the greatest weapon of all. And with God's help, we will spread the truth to the rest of the world.
If you have the capability of reducing the environmental impact of the population you have deliberately kept down on the farm, deliberately kept under a lid, so they don't have pollutionless technologies, they don't have free energy, then obviously the only way you can go is to limit the number of people that are going to be on that planet, which is your kind of vacation spot. And so there is a rationale, as awful and immoral and as bizarre as it may seem, to ultimately look to see if there are ways to reduce the population to where there is just a kind of a caretaker population on Earth, and you get to live anywhere you want to, and if you want a nice open skies, sunsets and broad seas, you can come to Earth because it will now be pristine once again. That makes a kind of a rationale for why they would want to eliminate so many workers here, because frankly, they don't need them.
Well, and that's would also make sense from the point of view then that this incredibly well-funded green movement that we see on the rise right now is trying to turn us all into Luddites as well, because we're not getting access to the real clean energy, free energy, anti-gravity that you mentioned before. So we're kind of going backwards as well on the surface here, if you know what I mean, Richard.
Well, again, this follows the model exactly, because if they have to keep some of us around for like maintenance staff, okay, serfs, slaves, whatever you want to call them, because bodies, remember, are a lot cheaper than technology. Yeah. Even in a world where you don't price things, it is so much easier to tell a human being what to do than to tell a robot what to do, because robots, even the best of them, break down.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So what are we looking at here in terms of? If we examine this logically, rationally, if they are behind some of the major catastrophes that are happening on the planet right now, Richard, oil spill, nuclear meltdown here at the facilities, if that's what they are, how does that play into this? Because that makes it even more dirty, right? What's going on? Well,
remember, it's only a short term. They are thinking long term. Transitions are messy. You have to get from here to there, right? And if going back to what I said earlier, this physics, this technology allows you to extend human lifespans to extraordinary levels. Where is the last time we read in actual documents that human beings lived, 1,000 years?
Probably the Bible, I guess, huh?
Precisely. And where is that derived from? What culture? What population?
I would say the Essenes, but the Hebrews, I guess, or the Hyksos, if you look at some of the other people out there, yeah?
Exactly. So if they have now been able to regenerate that ancient knowledge to where they can live 1,000 years productively, then they can afford to take the long view. Let's say it takes 100 years to totally transition from the population on the earth we have now to where it's down to where they are happy and the earth is returned to somewhat like the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 100 years, if you live 1,000 years, is 1/10 of your lifespan. That's for a human being now. If you live 60, 70 years, that's like 6 years.
So even nuclear radiation is no biggie here, or maybe they even have cleanup technologies that we don't know about.
Well, remember, the nuclear radiation can be ameliorated with this technology so it goes away in hours. How do I know that? Because some years ago on Good Morning America, some friends of mine demonstrated a pebble bed cold fusion technology that in 20 minutes reduced by half the radiation on live television in a beaker that has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. Let me repeat that. Uranium breakdown takes 4.5 billion years to get rid of half the uranium which is fissioning. They were able to demonstrate from cold fusion technologies on Good Morning America years ago on live television the ability to break down that nuclear waste in 20 minutes and not have to wait 4.5 billion years for it to go away by half. So those technologies, again, could be used to ameliorate what's going on in Japan right now. They could have been used at 3 Mile Island. They certainly could have been used at Chernobyl, and they were not. Because if we had access to those technologies, we get access to the whole ball of wax, as we say over here, and then we become their equals, and they cannot allow that. Ergo, we're being kept down on the farm in this transition until we could be moved aside for their plan for the future of their version of humanity. I mean, this is very scary and awesome stuff, and if I didn't have some good news at the end of this, I wouldn't even be talking like this.
What is some of the good news, Richard?
Well, the good news is that unbeknownst to them, the banksters quietly took their knowledge and developed in secret laboratories, black ops, weapons labs, and whatever, equivalent technologies in physics, and that's why we're at war, because our guys, the guys that run us on Earth, the banksters, in fact, and you can call them the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds, you know, those cliched names, but they, in fact, are now at war with these guys out there, and that's why you're seeing in our model all the bizarre things going on around the planet, because we're in a secret war where none of the protagonists want the slaves, meaning all the rest of us, to know we're at war. For the first time in history, we're in a war that we're not supposed to know about. And all we're hearing is like you're in the jungle in the middle of the night, right? And you're gathered around your little fire, and you're, roasting your roast pig over the spit or something, and you hear these big booms and thumping around in the darkness, and you have no idea what's out there. You just know that you don't want to get involved with it because it's a lot bigger than you are and probably a lot nastier, and you wouldn't come off very well. Well, the human race is like that. We're seeing all these weird things going on. They're being covered on the news as one thing when in fact they're merely the tip of the iceberg in terms of the secret conflict, the secret competition going on between the guys who would be our masters and the guys who are their masters, and they're fighting it out, and we're not supposed to know, which is why there have been no horrific cities decimated or millions of people killed in one instant. The closest we came, I think, to that kind of awful horror was the earthquake in Haiti. which in an instant, a few minutes, killed 200,000 people just days after the appearance of this incredible Norway spiral up over the northern climes of Russia and Sweden and Finland, which was a signal just before President Obama was to receive his Nobel Prize that in fact he was to do their bidding and not what his own agenda might be, whatever that is. And I think we can see modern history reaching a major turning point on the morning of December 9th, 2009, when that spiral appeared over the northern polar regions of Norway and Sweden and Russia and Finland, and things dramatically changed after that. Why would you build a nuclear plant in an earthquake zone at the edge of the ocean basically on the shore with a lousy 25-foot high wall to prevent a tsunami from sweeping you back into the ocean when you know you live in a place for thousands of years that has had earthquakes? And if you look at the USGS data or your own geological scientific people, you can see that major earthquakes have been increasing for decades, monotonically, very predictably, and it's only a matter of time until a big one hits close to you and you have a huge tsunami roll ashore and do exactly what was done.
Yeah.
This is not rocket science. This is not magic. This is so predictable, and yet they've done nothing. Have they done nothing to prevent it as they were told to do nothing?
They've been even making it worse because the Fukushima plant had actually kept over 40 years of spent nuclear rods underneath the plant. So I think someone mentioned a number of about 600,000 spent fuel rods might potentially be radiating out as we speak, because again they barely can get close to these damaged reactors. I think 4 in total now have been damaged. So we have no idea of how much is getting out there, Richard.
What's interesting is we're not given accurate numbers. We don't have an accurate survey. We don't even have cutaway drawings of what the plant looks like. We don't have, independent readings of the radiation. We are literally living in a controlled disaster unfolding, and that's not even counting the horrors of the earthquake, which has killed untold thousands of people, and then the tsunami, which drowned those that managed to survive. I mean, this is a triple whammy, and it's not being responded to in the way that other disasters have been responded to in the past. And I think, again, this is merely a speculation because I don't have hard data yet, but it fits to me the model that, yes, we're involved in a secret space war between humanity here on Earth and whoever our masters are out there who have evolved off Earth, as Dolan says, in the last 60 years, into this stunning breakaway civilization, and we are being basically blackmailed into staying here and minding our P's and Q's and doing exactly what they say. And if anybody gets out of line, they can use this as an example of, see, this is what we will do to you, and it's only a tenth of thousands of what we can do, so you don't question.
It's very strange, again, just what the point you bring up about how the international community is prevented from helping out here in Japan in one sense or another. I mean, look at how quickly they were ready and willing to intervene in the internal affairs of Libya now. That wasn't any problem. But here in Japan, where there is potentially the entire population of the northern hemisphere is at risk. It's crazy.
Well, I have heard numbers quoted something like 1,700 metric tons of radioactive rods, nuclear fuel rods that are stored in these ponds, waiting for when they can be transported to some kind of permanent storage off-site. And because these reactors were the first generation of nuclear reactors that General Electric built back in the 60s and 70s, they have to store those rods on site in a swimming pool and they put them on the upper floors of the same buildings that are built around the reactors.
Yeah.
So if a catastrophe comes along and wipes out your reactor, it also wipes out your capabilities to keep those spent fuel rods cool, as we are seeing. I mean, this is like a perfectly scripted disaster. Perfectly scripted. It's awesome to watch. It's painful to watch. And the only ray of hope that I think I can offer is that I think our guys have some secret technology that they are now using to ameliorate it, because by my calculations, we all should be living now under the same kind of disasters we had at Chernobyl. And the fact that we're not, the fact that even specialists are saying on network television, there are things going on here that we can't understand, it's not going the way we would think, tells me that maybe we are actually quietly using some secret technology to ameliorate the radioactivity, because we are not going to go peacefully as our masters want us to. We are fighting back. But no one is allowed to know that we're fighting back.
Just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish. And burnt my fingers right off of me, and it was some form of electrical force, because the kind of like being hit by a lightning bolt burned all my toenails off of me, completely crispy crittered my left foot, and burnt the shoe right off of me. All I remember is the smoking remains, and I'm still conscious, but in and out of, I didn't remember much. And there was a Green Beret that was right behind me that risked his life. In fact, he died. But he risked his life. He shoved me back in the basket and hit the button and took me up. And I wouldn't be alive talking to you today if it wasn't for him. I'm forever indebted. He lost his life. 66 Secret Service agents, Green Berets, Black Berets, crack troops lost their lives because the government, our United States government, lied, did not tell us anything about the alien threat. There's a war underneath there, and I'm talking dead serious. It's been going on since that time. Since late August of 1979, our military, the Russian military, basically the militaries of the world, have been in constant conflict with the outer space alien. The small gray, the large gray, the reptilians, the whole thing. There are 11 distinct races of aliens. 2 are benevolent. One had to leave here in a hurry because their world is under attack, both on the surface as well as underground. There, the Pleiadians. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. Would some of you raise your hands? You've heard of Billy Meyer and some of the, very good, about half the group. Well, Billy Meyer is one of these lucky people that they figured, well, he's kind of a simple type, we'll show him everything. Well, these are the benevolent aliens, and they've been here helping us. In fact, I have a picture, let me reach for it here. I have a picture of one of the aliens been working for the United States Pentagon for the last 58 years. His name is Val Valiant Thor. He's right here. There's my father in the background. This whole place, the ready room of the USS Eldridge, Al Bielika has probably explained, and maybe even shown you this picture. There's a list of some of the notable people in it. They're all the atomic bomb scientists of the day, all the time variant experimentalists of the day, all the top physicists of that particular day. This was in August of 1943. Now this guy was not changed one iota in 58 years. Started work, he came here, crashed here or whatever, whether he's under duress or not, he started work for our U.S. Navy and military operations in 1937, either 37 or 38 is what I've been told. So it's, for 58 years, this man's been employed, probably under duress. If you don't do as we say, we're just going to use you for alien bait or something, I don't know. But anyway, he basically hasn't changed. He lives for 490 years, is what he says his lifespan is. Now, he's supposedly a semi-benevolent, he's a human-looking type person. He has 6 fingers and 6 toes, and he's got one oversized heart, one lung, giant lung. His blood vessels are bigger. He's got copper oxide for blood, similar to an octopus. His brain capacity 300 centimeters greater than ours. He has a thinking capacity, IQ, if you were to measure it, be totally off the scale, be about a 1200 IQ. He speaks 100 languages fluently, alien as well as others. He's a remarkable person. I had a chance to meet him one time. Now, by the way, he doesn't shake hands. He's kind of in a spacesuit because all aliens, regardless benevolent or otherwise, they're carrying germs and diseases and bacterium in and on them that are deadly to us. If I were making policy, I'd quarantine them all because how do we not know that some of our diseases like AIDS, Ebola, hantavirus, and a few of these other weird designer diseases, as I call them, are not made from the cadavers of some of these aliens as a biological weapon to use against the people of the United States. Well, I'm a tired American speaking out. Now, what I'm telling you is kind of almost like a brain overload here. Back in 1946, we set off actually 4 atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll. It's a group of islands in the South Pacific. I have an original photograph here with original language on the photograph that shows there is a large alien spaceship off a wingtip of a United States aircraft. It was a drone aircraft right at the point where the bomb was beginning to show a neutron flash cloud. Here's the bomb going off. Here's the airplane tip here, and here is the alien spacecraft. Now, in 1947, questions later, please. In 1947, after Roswell debacle, our military got before the U.S. Senate, or hauled before the U.S. Senate, says, what's going on here? Well, we didn't know anything about discs until this happened. It plopped in our backyard. Total lie. They lied to the U.S. Senate. They should have been prosecuted as traitors. Anybody lying to a United States Senator, or House of Representative, any Senator, House of Representative, person, President of the United States, Vice President, any cabinet member, lying to the American public is a traitor and should be dealt with in an appropriate fashion. This is actual proof, positive, that this occurred in 1946. Now, the U.S. military knew all about flying discs, and flying disc technology is early. Thoroughly early, it was 1933. Of course, remember the Germans did too, the Nazi Germans, Hitler and all their bunch of people. Now, it gets to the big question. If all this has been hidden from us, everybody says, well, where's the proof? I've got some of the proof laying on the table. But a lot of you probably are totally skeptical. They say, well, I could be anything. In my hand here, I have a piece of what's called corbamide. It's the heaviest element in the world. Element 140. This piece of material weighs 15 ounces. It's 3.5 times the weight of uranium. It cannot be made to emit gamma rays. It cannot be isotoped. It is totally stable. It is used in all stealth aircraft and all Phoenix-class submarines. When combined with other alien elements, it is impregnable. It cannot be melted with charged particle beam weapon. When properly combined in secretive compounds, it can withstand temperatures in excess of 10 million degrees Fahrenheit. It is grown by aliens who have given the other side of the alien question is, some of these aliens have broken off from their mainstream and said, we're not getting a fair shake, and so this is what happens. And I'm talking about the alien grays. Some of them broken away. They're talk about not being popular. This particular piece of metal is an amazing piece of technology. It's capable of being grown in 15 different crystal systems. Now, I'm a geologist, and prior to 15 or 20 years ago, knew of only 6 crystal systems. There's actually 15, if you count all the alien metals. Now, this is only element 140. If you look at the local periodic table in your local library, it says 104. Somewhere down the line, we've been lied to, we've been cheated. What we have to do is we have to literally ask for the truth. If we cannot ask for the truth, we must demand the truth. We must take it before courts of law in common law systems, and we must demand it. If we cannot do this, our founding fathers told us the only thing left is to overthrow, to get the parasites out. I don't advocate overthrow, but it does look like this may be the only alternative.
Surface of the sun. This part that's missing, the reason it's dark is that whole chunk of the sun basically ripped off, blew out, and is coming our way at about 2 million miles an hour.
Hey! Our way.
Our way.
That doesn't sound good.
Well, this kind of thing happens all the time, but you don't very often see something that big. So I'm going to go all Carl Sagan on you here for a second. I'm going to go all Carl Sagan on you here for a second.
I know it sounds crazy.
Hey!
So I'm going to go all Carl Sagan on you here for a second. So this is about 80 times as wide as the Earth. If you're looking at the Earth on this scale, it's about that large. So this is an incredible chunk of the sun that's flying out. What happens when it hits our planet, it causes auroras, it wiggles the magnetic field. The thing you really worry about is it can disrupt your GPS, it can mess with your communication satellites, it can mess with your power lines.
Is that like a solar flare? Or?
So yeah, so these hot spots are where things are, it's where the things are really kind of intense and bubbling. Oh. So yeah, so these hot spots are where things are, it's where the things are really kind of intense and bubbling. This is where it's basically reached the point where it just kind of completely blew off. You're actually not seeing the hot gas here because it's no longer around the sun. It's coming into our face.
Did we ever know this before?
Hey. I know it sounds crazy.
Blew off. You're actually not seeing the hot gas here because it's no longer around the sun. It's coming into our face.
Did we ever know this before? Or did we not take note of it?
Well, we know it's really very recent that we've even been able to see these things, and so we kind of knew, there's this constant low-level thing,
Hey!
So I'm going to go all Carl Sagan on you here for a second. We know it's really very recent that we've even been able to see these things, and so we kind of knew, there's this constant low-level thing, a few $1 million a year damages, more or less, just our solar satellites, power lines, things. We knew that the sun was messing with us, and we didn't exactly know why. Now you see why.
I know it sounds crazy.
We kind of knew, there's this constant low-level thing, a few $1 million a year damages, more or less, just our solar satellites, power lines, things. We knew that the sun was messing with us, and we didn't exactly know why. Now you see why. And the real worry is, this is actually, believe it or not, this is a small one. This is a minor one.
Wow. Can you tell us what this means then?
So what this means is, this is what the sun does all the time, and we don't really know why it does it with us, and we didn't exactly know why. Now you see why. And this is what the sun does all the time, and we don't really know why it does it with us, and we didn't exactly know why. Now you see why. And didn't exactly know why. Now you see why. And we don't really know why it does it with us, and we didn't exactly know why. Now you see why. And hot gas here because it's no longer on the sun. It's coming into our face.
Did we ever know this before? Or did we not take note of it?
Well, we know it's really very recent that we've even been able to see these things, and so we kind of knew, there's this constant low-level thing, Hey! So I'm going to go all Carl Sagan on you here for a second. We know it's really very recent that we've even been able to see these things, and so we kind of knew, there's this constant low-level thing, a few $1 million a year damages, more or less, just our solar satellites, power lines, things. We knew that the sun was messing with us, and we didn't exactly know why. Now you see why.
I know it sounds crazy.
We kind of knew, there's this constant low-level thing, a few $1 million a year damages, more or less, just our solar satellites, power lines, things. We knew that the sun was messing with us, and we didn't exactly know why. Now you see why. And the real worry is, this is actually, believe it or not, this is a small one. This is a minor one.
Wow. Can you tell us what this means then?
So what this means is, this is what the sun does all the time, and we don't really know why it does it with us, and we didn't exactly know why. Now you see why. And we don't really know why it does it. There's an 11-year cycle of solar activity, and right now we're going into a time of peak activity. And that's when all those things I was talking about before, we really need to watch for your power lines, your satellites, for all that.
But you just said something there. You said it happens all the time. If it happens all the time, is there a real risk to us? Well, or are we just noticing now?
Well, so there's two parts. I mean, there's stuff like this. Like I said, this is actually not even a particularly bad one. So this is what happens all the time that we weren't really noticing, that now we're starting to understand and forecast. But there are much more intense ones. There was a giant solar flare in 1962, right before we really had a whole lot of satellites, an even bigger one in 1859. Wow. And if something like that happened again, that could cause a global blackout.
You always talk about solar flares as the biggest danger on a large scale. So we will see. Corey, thank you. Excellent explanation.
Oh, well, thank you.
And we'll call you Carl Sagan next time. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, millions and millions of Earths would fit in this picture.
Yeah, nice.
There you go.
Thank you, Corey. All right.
Hey. I know it sounds crazy.
Kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
A Senate investigation revealed that President Nixon was involved in the Watergate scandal.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
We did not, repeat, did not trade weapons or anything else for hostages.
Despite Reagan's denials, investigations soon revealed that arms had been traded for hostages held in the Mideast.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
Raise taxes and I'll say no, and they'll push and I'll say no, and they'll push again and I'll say to them, read my lips.
Then he gave us the second biggest tax increase in American history.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist. Shut up, conspiracy theorist. Shut up, conspiracy theorist. Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
scientists from all over the world are trying to figure out what caused a mysterious blue light to spiral in the sky over Norway on Wednesday. Sheila McVicker has the latest on the mystery. Sheila, good morning.
Good morning, Harry. Mysterious light indeed. A light appearing high in the Arctic sky, baffling those who saw it and exciting a lot of comment.
НЛО. Там звезда по центру. Приблизь, Владик. Охуеть. Это в натуре НЛО какое-то. Охуеть. Владик, мы звезды. Оно увеличивается.
Early yesterday morning, just before dawn, this appeared in the Norwegian sky. That's Norwegian for what the heck is that? A blue light, small at first, growing into a spiral, and then disappearing into what appeared to be a black hole.
А вот НЛО летит. Наконец-то я его снял на камеру. Вот, летит. Я сам не знаю, что летит. А? Явно, что не звезда летит, что? Явно, что не звезда летит. Быстро идет, да? Ну, сейчас за город сядет. Вот такая фигня, вот уже не первый раз вижу я.
Я тоже видел, только без этого, без облака.
Бывает, моргает, да? А. Я вот тоже видал такой, быстро, да?
Не знаю, НЛО или что это, но это явно не наше, не космические.
Ну. Я сейчас смотрю, думаю, нифига себе, что летит. Там властный.
Spiral of light moving and then suddenly stopping.
There's still a lot of speculation to what it could be.
The Arctic sky is no stranger to atmospheric phenomena. The northern lights and the seasonal flight of Santa just two. But the explanation here apparently lies across the border with the Russian military and another failed missile launch. A respected Russian daily first reported this morning that the third stage of a sophisticated Bulava intercontinental missile failed. And space experts point to the spiraling of this missile as it failed to launch properly as an explanation for the shape seen over Norway, the halo, they say, produced by missile fuel.
Я не знаю. Что-то в центре светится, да? Это сегодня будет на НТВ. Слушай, нет?
Вообще без понятия. Смотри, какая здоровая. Свечение, да?
Так, за трубу сдуму. Что-то непонятно.
Ты смотри, ярче, в смысле, круг больше, больше, больше.
А вам поближе сделать, поближе.
Да нифига не получается.
Непонятно. Это вообще непонятно. Ну ты кто? Отдали маленько. Это непонятно. Как будто что-то запустили, да, вот? Ну, движется же. Только прям маленький был, да? Ага. Не моргает ведь как самолет-то.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist. Shut up, conspiracy theorist. Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
On clear days, you can often see long white lines being traced high in the sky. They are contrails of jet aircraft, actually long, slender clouds. Weathermen are finding them especially fascinating because a theory is being developed that those long white lines may be changing our weather for the better. Details from Roger O'Neill.
The exhaust from jet engines, usually seen as long, thin trails of white clouds behind high-flying jet airplanes, may be a big reason why there are 30 fewer days of sunshine a year in the Midwest now than there were in 1900. The daily range between high and low temperatures has also narrowed. Weather researchers studying cloud cover in 10 Midwestern states found a sharp increase in cloudiness with the increase in commercial jet travel. Particularly in the main east-west jet corridor, there were even more clouds. A jet produces a contrail, or cloud, because its exhaust consists primarily of water vapor.
In the absence of natural clouds, given the correct atmospheric conditions, jet aircraft in high frequency can almost completely cover the atmosphere, visible atmosphere, with clouds.
Simonin says unlike most changes in the atmosphere caused by man, this one is beneficial. Clouds help farmers in the Midwest by blocking the sun. Temperature extremes can damage plants and speed up the evaporation of soil moisture. In the winter, city people benefit because clouds act as a blanket, preventing warm air from escaping into the atmosphere.
People on pot kill families, wipe out a whole family.
To me, it means that he is less likely to pick a fight with someone.
I mean, people on pot shoot each other.
Isn't it true that when you smoke pot, you just want to lay on the sofa and eat?
People on pot kill families.
It's a Chinese spacewalk. A bubble rises in the pool. It's complete fraud. Here the helmet gets hit on the International Space Station and a bubble rises into the pool.
Proceed this way.
Tossing some bullshit, and a bubble appears at 3:39 in this video. And it takes an odd trajectory because it's in a water pool. Houston, we have a problem. Space is broken. Sorry, U.S. government. I have to show them the bubble. There's the bubble in the pool that we just saw. Yep, doesn't even go in a straight line. It's in a water pool. Takes a very odd trajectory because the water is actually moving around. It's not still. And here on the International Space Station, they once even got caught with a scuba tank in space.
Which is the faking of spacewalks in a swimming pool. In this vid, you catch a glimpse of someone wearing a scuba tank. Scuba tanks in space?
NASA does literally nothing in space. It's all bullshit.
The video is sped up, so it looks more natural. But yeah, they're underwater, and the video is sped up, and they do this on the Hubble Space Telescope as well. So that's how you know the Hubble Space Telescope never existed in orbit. This is all bullshit. I need somebody to sing the Little Mermaid song Under the Sea. They're in a water tank. From a distance, can you tell? What's with all this atmospheric bullshit? What kind of camera is this? Do they make it look like they're underwater on purpose? They have two water tanks. They have the water tank that they train in, and then they have this water tank for the fraud. They never work in space. The International Space Station is complete bullshit. What's even more ridiculous about them filming spacewalks in a water pool, and spacewalks are impossible, is that the women for the hoax perm their hair. Here she's in front of a blue screen, and the background is not moving. The cable is completely still. And in real life, there would be airflow in the space station. The space station would be making adjustments that would not stay fixated. It's just a screenshot.
That's what the gamma increased. If you pull the gamma back to the stock image, you don't see it as much, but it caught my eye to play with the filter, and when you increase the gamma, it's very interesting.
Good evening, folks. Dan, lots of luck to you.
Have you ever looked at a solar eclipse and thought it was amazing? Imagine what a solar eclipse would look like from the moon, since the Earth is 6 times bigger. Recording video from the moon looking at the Earth going in front of the sun would be a beautiful sight to see. And yet we have never seen it before. Why not? Do we really have to ask NASA to go to the moon and film a special Earth eclipse? It's not like they need to send people for this.
I mean, look at this thing. It's a lunar eclipse. Why not have a fucking camera on the moon recording us during this event, NASA? It's not like that is another galaxy. It's the fucking moon and it's right there. Why the fuck don't you send the first female on the moon anyway, NASA? What the fuck? Man went 6 times in 4 years. Bullshit. Is it really so hard to put a camera on the moon for this? Would it look something like this? Would it be beautiful in real life? I call bullshit on NASA. They don't film this simple event because they can't. They don't send women astronauts to the moon because they can't. NASA are cunts. Lying about everything in space. They've never been to space before. Women on the fake International Space Station with perms for the hoax. Give me a break. I wasn't born yesterday, NASA. Women have never been to space, and neither have men. They are Freemasonic cunts. All of them. Corrupt fucks. Fuck Freemasons. Fuck NASA. Fuck SpaceX. Fuck TV. TV is bullshit. The world is controlled by
you to vote on the news, and here's the winner. There's a huge, hidden, heavenly body right here in our solar system. Evidence is mounting that either a brown dwarf star or a gas giant planet is lurking at the outermost reaches of our solar system, far beyond the planet Pluto. According to the British newspaper The Independent, the object is 4 times the size of Jupiter. Experts say the presence of such a massive object could explain why a barrage of comets has been coming from that direction. Well,
Observations, however, show that changes of some kind are still going on in the lunar craters. In October and November of 1866, Smith, the director of the observatory at Athens, noticed that the deep crater Linnaeus, remember the Linnaeus that we seen earlier, people, whose diameter is 5.6 miles, has completely disappeared, and in its place there was only a little whitish luminous cloud. Now people, this is very important. Let's go to what they said about Linnaeus earlier. Okay, remember here, right? Linnaeus, whose diameter is 5.6 miles, okay? That's how big Linnaeus is. That's how they measured it, okay? 5.6 miles. Let's see how big they have Linnaeus here. Okay, over here, they have Linnaeus, the diameter is 2.4 kilometers. Okay, that's how big NASA claim Linnaeus is. 2.4 kilometers, okay? Now, let's see how much is 2.4 kilometers. Because people remember, right? The scientists back in 1866 is claiming that the crater basically grew smaller or disappeared.